Hi guys, so before we get into it, just a quick disclaimer that you'll find all my other Wrong Turn reviews in my Wrong Turn playlist, and there will be spoilers today if that bothers you. Don't let it bother you. All the cool people these days like having their films spoiled for you, honest. So just to give you a bit of background as to where I stood with this film coming in, I've been a Wrong Turn fan for a long, long time, and yet this was the only one I'd never seen up until this week. And I think the reason for that is because of all the bad reviews the film has had over the years. I have regularly listened to other YouTubers, either in discussion or in a review, say just how bad this film is. I can barely remember anybody ever having a good word to say about Wrong Turn 5. So I kind of figured when I put the disc into the machine, at best, I'm going to have a mediocre time with this, and at worst, I'm just going to think it's an absolute turd. But I'm pleased to say that the film did at least achieve a certain level of mediocrity with me. The story is actually pretty decent. But first, let me tell you that it was directed by Declan O'Brien. You might remember him from such films as Wrong Turn 3 and, Wrong Turn 4. Now, I did wonder, how is it that Declan O'Brien was able to direct the pretty decent Wrong Turn 3 and just let his standards slip so badly when it came to Wrong Turn 4? But if you look a little bit closer, you'll see that O'Brien only directed number 3. He didn't write it. With number 4, they gave him writing duties as well, and same with 5. And I think that's why. I just don't think this guy fully grasps what this series is meant to be. He really loses control of the villains in both Wrong Turn 4 and 5, which is a real shame. To give you a synopsis of the plot, so we've got this guy, this new character. I don't know his name actually, but I'm going to call him Doug, after the actor Doug Bradley, famous of course for playing Pinhead in Hellraiser, but that doesn't mean much to me because I'm totally not a Hellraiser guy. I'm not even sure I would have recognised Doug Bradley in this, but for the fact that I had prior knowledge of who he was. But this character, he's like the mentor father figure of the Mountain Men we previously saw in Wrong Turn 4. At the start of this, he's captured and thrown into a jail cell in the local township. It's not a very big town, think Crystal Lake from the early Friday the 13th films. But it's nice to have an urban setting in one of these Wrong Turn movies for a change. But for the rest of this movie, the 3 Mountain Men have got to try and break out Doug, and getting in their way will be an assortment of police and also some youths who just happen to be in the area for the Mountain Men festival that's going on. So this film has very much got a vibe of Wrong Turn meets Assault on Precinct 13, and I really liked that as a concept actually, and for quite a lot of this film I was enjoying watching the story play out and seeing where all the characters would eventually meet each other in the plot. Credit where it's due. In terms of story, at least, this film gets a tick. Some of the characters are pretty good as well. I think it helps that there's only 5 youths this time, as opposed to the 10 that we had in Wrong Turn 4. Having 5 just makes it easier for me to keep track of these people and get to know them a little bit. Plus, I actually recognised one of the actors this time, Roxanne McKee, who plays the girl who ends up getting her eyes taken out. She used to be a British soap actress who was pretty well known, and she went on to do TV shows like Game of Thrones and Strike Back, and I think she did a horror movie about a killer in a school once upon a time. I don't think this film shows off her talents that well because she's having to put on an American accent, and I noticed that some English started to come out a little bit in the words that she was saying, but normally she's really, really good. The best character in the film, though, for me, is the cop, who was also played by a British actress in this, but I didn't actually even realise that until after the film, because this cop character, the actress who's playing her, much better at doing the American dialect for me, but the actual character, top quality, really tough female sheriff who's constantly having to make a lot of difficult decisions on the fly, and for the most part coping really well. There's also a drunk tank character you think is going to be really throwaway in the beginning, but he's got a little bit of an arc, you discover, and throughout the story he turns out to be a really nice guy. So dotted here and there are some reasonable characters in this film, but the trouble is there are two negatives about Wrong Turn 5, which just, if not completely sink it, then almost sink it. These two negatives are just huge. They really bugged me. Not just during the film, but after it, when I was trying to process the whole thing. One of those bad things is the kills. The kills are just awful in this film. They're like extended torture sequences, and I don't know why Declan O'Brien is obsessed with writing kills in this manner. He started doing this in Wrong Turn 4. There were a few instances where instead of people just being killed, they get knocked out and put into some torturous situation where they're just made to suffer for like 10 minutes. But in this film, we've gone a step further. It seems now that every kill is like that, and it's just silly. I mean, we're in the middle of a town setting. It's not practical to come up with these torturous situations. In the woods, I guess you've got a little bit more time if you want to do something like that. But I just don't think this kind of kill is what this franchise is all about, and it's just silly at times, the lengths that the Mountain Men are going to put people into these horrible situations instead of just killing them. Now, I don't mind the power station kill, the guy who gets strung up and electrocuted, because it's kind of fun and it's over quite quickly. But the film really reaches a nadir with the giant lawnmower kill. I don't know what that machine's called. It's some kind of giant thresher machine. I don't know the name of it, but this kill kind of annoyed me. It would take a long time for Three Finger to bury somebody in dirt like that, so just the head is there, and chain the other guy up. And then he wastes time driving this machine across the football field and teasing the boys before finally killing them in that horrible way. But the whole thing is just pointless. And plus, the Mountain Men are meant to be trying to break Doug Bradley out of prison. How have they got time for this side adventure? I really don't like it. If this film had just had normal slasher film type kills with people dying normally, I think it would have been a hell of a lot better. But you wouldn't have even needed to have changed the method of kills that much. So you could have had one of these lads on the football field being chased by the same machine, just trip over and go into the blades, and that would have been fine by me. You would have had the same gore, but just the method of dying changes everything. It's not the gore that is the sticking point for me here. It's the fact that people are just being chained up or trapped, and they're just being made to suffer pointlessly for minutes on end when they've got no chance of getting out of it. If somebody's running away from one of those machines, at least they've got a chance in real time, and then they might get clumsy and trip or whatever. But for me, that's a proper horror kill, not just taking it completely out of the character's hands and saying, okay, you've got absolutely zero chance, but we're just going to bury you in the ground and let you suffer for 10 minutes as you wait for your death. That's just not my sort of kill. It's as if O'Brien thinks that the more pain and suffering you put into a horror film, the better that horror film becomes. No, what I want is atmosphere and tension and scares and good characters, maybe even the occasional laugh. I don't think pain and suffering is high up on my list as its own entity. The more pain you put into a horror film, you're not making that film better, you're just adding more and more pain, and you might actually make the film worse, because everybody's got their own sweet spot of the amount of pain and gore they like in their horror films. And yes, I do see the irony of the concept of having a sweet spot for pain and suffering, but O'Brien goes way over the top in this film. I can't even remember the last time I saw 5 people suffer as much as these 5 youths do in this film. To give you an example, there's a kill here where a woman, she gets stabbed in her stomach, and then Three Finger rips her intestines out, shoves them into her mouth, and she's sort of chewing on them as she's dying. And let me tell you, that is the softest death that any of these 5 get. If I had to choose how to die out of the 5 ways presented to me amongst this group of people, I'd be choosing the woman who has to eat her own intestines. All the other deaths are far, far worse. That just shows you, doesn't it? But yeah, I just don't like the way the kills are done in this film. But that's one massive negative. The other one is the ending. It's so morbid and grey and depressing, and I just couldn't believe what I was watching. Now, I knew coming into this that the main 3 Mountain Men would have to survive so they could be in Wrong Turn 1, because this is another prequel. But Doug Bradley doesn't have to survive. He's not in any of the films after this, so why couldn't we have the pleasure of seeing him killed? I don't know if it was the original plan that he was going to come back for number 6 and they wanted to leave their options on the table kind of thing, but that's a shame because he really should have died in this film. I actually thought that was what they were going to go for, because when he's mouthing off all the way through the film, I thought, okay, well, at the end we'll get the satisfaction of seeing him die somehow. I even thought that the Mountain Men might do it. I thought maybe they would kill him just after they rescued him, as if, okay, we don't actually need you anymore, you're a bit of a pain in the arse, and plus you're not one of us, you're not deformed like we are. So I thought they might do that. But yeah, really irritating that this guy gets away. But it's not just that, it's the fate of the final 2 women I really didn't like. The female cop character, she's such a good person that to have her just hung up in a jail cell and she's got to blow her own brains out or get burned alive, that's not the way to do this. And the other girl who gets her eyes cut out, as if that's not bad enough, she then gets picked up by the Mountain Men and she's basically told that she's going to be raped again and again, have her tits cut off, and then she'll be killed. Now, if you're going to give somebody an ending like that, it has to be a really bitchy character who you could say maybe deserves it a little bit, but this particular girl, she's done nothing to warrant that. And I think to myself, why couldn't you have just let her get away? Because she's blind, so she can't testify against the Mountain Men. So you could have let her get away, just get into a normal car. She's still going to have to spend the rest of her life blind. I mean, that's still a bad fate, but at least she could have a life and go again at some point. But ending with this, I just don't understand the thinking behind it. It's like, let's make the ending as evil and nasty as possible, and it's going to be awesome. I'm like, no, O'Brien, I just don't like that. When I try and picture myself watching this film again, I might actually enjoy the first hour, but all the time I'm going to be thinking, okay, so eventually we're going to get into the final crawl of the movie where we're just heading towards that depression and morbid stuff at the end, and I'm not even sure if I want to watch the ending again. So normally at this point of the review, I would show you the version that I watched for this, but I actually rented Wrong Turn 5 on Sky for about £3.50, despite the fact that I own a copy of the film as part of this German Blu-ray box set. And if you're wondering why I just didn't get the disc out of here for Wrong Turn 5, that's because I discovered about this box set that most of the films have been heavily edited. Like, a lot of the gore has been stripped out, the kills have been ruined, the sex has been trimmed. Oh yeah, the sex in Wrong Turn 5, I didn't talk about that yet, did I? So there are a whopping 3 sex scenes in this film, which I'm sure you can agree is a little bit too much for any one horror film. One sex scene in a horror film is kind of normal, I would say. If there's 2 in there, then I would suggest that they've gone a little bit OTT with the titillation, but having 3 in there, at that point, I think you need to be going back to the script and seeing if that kind of stuff can be reined in a little bit. But Wrong Turn 5 is not a film that does things by half measures, so we have 3 sex scenes, one of which has no relation to the rest of the story whatsoever. It's really weird. So we cut to this cop character who is just stood watching the Mountain Men Festival, and a girl comes up to him, and she's lost her pass or something. I forget the details, but the implication is that if this cop helps her, she will do something for him in return, if you see what I mean. And so they get into the back of the cop car that's nearby, and they just start humping away, and the camera's right in the thick of it. There's tits bouncing all over the place, and we watch this for like 20-30 seconds. I don't know, it's a pretty intense scene. But then we never see these 2 characters again for the rest of the movie, and this was like the first scene we saw them at all. So it's like, what is the point of this scene? I think there is a very distant connection to the plot. So the female cop back at the jail, I think she tries to call this horny cop when he's going at it, but he doesn't answer his call because he's busy. So I think the idea is that we're being shown that the female cop back at the jailhouse is not getting much help from her colleagues, but that's literally the only connection that the film has to this sex scene. I don't think I've ever seen a sex scene that is so disconnected from everything else that's going on across the 90 minutes of movie. It's just really bizarre, but that is Wrong Turn 5. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and see what sort of score I'm going to give this. We've got 2 bloody axes out of 5, so despite everything that I hate about this film, there are some things to enjoy. I do like the story, I do like some of the characters, and I will say that this is probably a really good party film. If you can watch this with a group of mates, I think you probably have a banging good time, just laughing at the cheesy kills and the sex and all this. And Yeah, I think that is probably this film's worth watching it with other people, but watching it on your own, very different experience, I reckon. But this is the same score I gave Wrong Turn for, so I guess they're both kind of on a level. And I've not yet decided which one I dislike the most, but we'll see. But for now, I will bid you farewell. I'll be back soon to review Wrong Turn 6. Until next time, cheerio.